Okay, I'd like to call meeting of Corporate Services Committee to order. I'll just look to committee members to see if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, let's move to the statement, which I will read. This is that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing, or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. Let's look to the consent items. I have indication from Councillor Van Holst that he'd like to pull 2.1 and 2.4. See if there's any others the colleagues would like to pull. Okay, seeing none, let's have 2.2, 2.3, 2.5, and 2.6 up. I know that Councillor Usher in particular would like to speak to 2.5 and 2.6.
Mr. Chair. If there's no debate, I just need to address them. At least 2.5 and 2.6, I'd just like to address those.
I'll put you on the speakers list. Is there a mover for those? Councillor Zafman, Deputy Mayor Hubert. Any speakers?
Which ones?
2.2, 2.3, 2.5, and 2.6.
So will you allow me to address 2.5 and 2.6 then?
I certainly will. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Chair, I didn't turn my page here. I just want to address this advocacy fund because I think it's something that is very important for us to participate in. It's an investment that we're making. It's over and above our membership. And the whole thing is going to cost over $1.5 million. So it's being shared among all the municipalities across the nation. Some very small, some large, as you read in here. But this is something that was passed by the previous board when I was on the board. And that's the reason why I wanted to encourage you to approve this. This is just London's share. It's a measly $20,000 per year. $20,000 for 2 years. And it's really, it was very, very effective at the last election. In fact, it was so effective that much of the Liberals program came directly from the FCM advocacy. And FCM wants to advance that role now to advocate with the candidates and with the individual parties so that we can get even more out of it. If you remember, the government added an $81 billion on top of what they had proposed over a 10-year period to make it $185 billion for infrastructure, transit, and a whole lot of other things, including what we are getting for things like BRT and the $204,000, that's where it's coming from, as well as housing, national housing strategy. All of those were from the past. There are some details that still has to work out now, and over the next 2 years, it's really about 19 months from now. Sorry, it's about, what, 13 months, maybe? I can't remember, but whenever the election is, that's more or less the period that this money is going to be spent on to begin the advocacy for the next election. And I think it's a small investment to make for what we, as a municipality and as a nation, get out of it. And ultimately, the message that we take to the federal government is community building is nation building. And that's the end result of this. That's why we play a part in this. So I urge you to feel comfortable in approving this money. Okay, that's for that part.
I have Councillor Zafman and then Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to comment briefly on 2.2, the new entryway signage for city-owned industrial parks. I know we dealt with this very recently at another meeting, so I'm glad to see that we're moving forward with this and making sure that we are well advertising our great industrial parks. We've seen a lot of great success in them over the last couple of years, and so making sure they're well signed, I think, is really important. So glad to see that coming forward, and thanks to staff for bringing that.
Councillor Morgan and then Councillor Van Holst.
Yes, I'll be brief. I appreciate the words of Councillor Usher, who's been involved in the FCM for quite some time. So I'm referring to obviously 2.2 2.5 and 2.6. And Councillor Usher's right that the FCM spent a lot of time on talking about the Special Advocacy Fund and getting information on it at the most recent board meeting in September. And it is an investment because the FCM will be advocating very aggressively for both political and fiscal autonomy for municipalities from the federal government, and discovering which tools would be most appropriate to do so. In other words, an investment of $40,000 may pay millions and millions and millions of dollars back to municipalities, including the municipality of London in the future, as it did through the process leading up to the 2015 federal election. And so there is a detailed plan ahead. The FCM will be continuing to work on it throughout the rollout of the campaign. The work has already started. There will be a lobby conference with all the MPs in November. And then into the spring and into the core election period, there will be the ability to try to shape and influence party platforms through this advocacy work. So it's very important. And of course, my report on the most recent board meeting is there, which members can review on their own time. And if anybody has any questions about the activities and what happened at the board meeting back in September, I'd be happy to answer them.
Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I do think this is an excellent investment because the $40,000 is a small amount compared to the kinds of wins that the FCM gains for us. So I think it's very well leveraged. I had a question through you to our staff, just regarding the contributions. I note that these are taxed, so it's not as much a donation as a service. Could maybe just comment on page 40 why the HST is charged on this one.
Through the chair, basically the way FCM has billed this, there is HST applicable in accordance with the rules. So it's not like a grant that is non-HST able. It basically has that. So it's been done in accordance, and other than that, I don't think I have anything else that to shed some light on it, because it's not done in the context of a grant. So my expectation is that they would be using it to offset costs that they have that would be HST applicable.
Okay, thank you. Happy to move that.
Councillor Usher.
Just to do with that question, it may have something to do with the fact that FCM is a non-profit organization, and they probably have to charge taxes. I don't know the reason why either, but it may have something to do with that. I'm sure that FCM wouldn't charge us HST if they didn't have to.
Any other discussion on 2.2, 2.3, 2.5, or 2.6? Councillor Van Holst.
Just one last question. There's, it points out that there's going to be a change in the amount that municipalities can receive from the federal government, up to 40% of project costs, and that's the plan. And then it also talks about rural communities receiving even more than that. You know, we've got a portion of our municipality that's rural. Do we think that we'll be able to take advantage of any prorated portion of that?
Who wants to take a stab at that one? Mr. Thompson.
Thank you for the question. So the 4 streams that the federal government has identified, I am assuming that this is in relation to item 2.6. The 4 streams the federal government has identified are the Public Transit Infrastructure Fund, or STREAM, the Green Infrastructure Stream, and the Community Culture and Recreation Stream. Those envelopes are pending. The next steps at the provincial level. The 4th stream is the rural stream, and it has been consistently communicated that will operate similar to how rural funding has happened in previous programs, which will establish a population cutoff over which communities that have populations over a cutoff won't be eligible for that. It'll be smaller communities only. That being said, we have a number of small communities around London who our understanding is they would be more than eligible for these types of programs when they get up and running.
Councillor Usher on 2.6.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to congratulate my new colleague on FCM board with this report. It's very vital. I like this report. This seemed to be a little different from the way we used to have it. So I think that this is so easy to read, and you know, it's caps. It's a synopsis of what happens at the meeting. We don't need all the details and everything. So I really, really appreciate the fact that you get it done this way. Thanks.
I don't see any other speakers. Let's bring that up for a vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
That brings us back to item 2.1, which was pulled by Councillor Van Holst. I will just point out, colleagues, that the recommendation for this, staff recommendation is a little bit different than what you see in your package. As you may recall, we already approved a source of financing for this project a couple of years ago. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you. So my question is, I've got a couple, but one is regarding security costs for this. So I think we had been paying about $600,000 in security to on these sites, and I'm wondering how that might change once the demolition is and the abatement is completed.
I can't speak to the amount of the costs, but I can tell you that the city has brought in a security company for the purposes of the Colburn building, which was part of the Phase A decommissioning. That was the one building that the city retained, and we have had 24/7 security. That is, a person sits in a car adjacent to the building and periodically goes into the building to keep vandals and vagrants out of the building. So currently on the north side of South Street, LHSC is responsible for a separate security detail for all of those buildings. If you've been by the site, it's been boarded. At the point when the contractor takes over, which is expected to be November the 1st, the contractor will be putting hoarding around the site and will be responsible for security during demolition. But once demolition is complete and the transfer has occurred to the city would be responsible to expand its security detail to cover the two buildings on the north side that are going to be retained. So in other words, we're going to have expanded security on the site for the purpose of the three buildings that the city has elected to retain.
Thank you. My other question was regarding the payments. So it was it's just numbers in there that seems a little odd to me. It was about $2,380,000 that the city owes, and it said that we're paying it in monthly payments of $1.7 million, and that doesn't amount to even 2 months of payments. So I wondered if there was just some clarification. Perhaps I'm not reading this, reading that correctly, but I'm referring to the bottom of page 10 on the agenda and page 4 in the report.
Are you looking at the source of financing report?
Mr. Belch, is under section 4.03. This is under the amending agreement. It's under Phase B, lands, decommissioning and demolition, sub B,
Yes.
sub A.
I've got that. So as with Phase A, we're going to be paying out as the contract is completed. So LHSC is project managing this file, and they have selected the general contractor. And as the general contractor completes their work, we will be responsible on a monthly basis to pay on a pro rata basis for the work that's completed according to our funding share. And then at the balance of, and this can occur at a different time, so that's the first part of the payments. And then the B part, on the completion of the abatement of what I describe as the old medical school, I believe it's building 50, the health sciences building, it's referred to variously. When that site is abated, that is, the hazardous substances are removed, then the city is then in a position to purchase the site for $680,000. So that would be a lump sum payment at that point. And at this point, it's up to the contractor to select how they approach this project. I would expect that they're going to be starting with abatement probably in that building, moving east, so that purchase probably will occur fairly early on once it's abated, and then the demolition activities will occur subsequently, and that's where the other part is paid. That's intended to be a general statement, the monthly payments. It might be every 6 weeks, but it's certified. The important thing is it's certified based on the completion of the project. It's no different than any of our construction projects.
Okay, thank you. That clarification helped me.
Councillor Zafin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, thank you to Mr. Belch for his great work on this file. I think we've been lucky to have Mr. Belch's work help us on a number of very complicated files, including this one, so thank you for that. One point that I just wanted to go over was Article 4, 4.03 sub B speaks to the removal of existing buildings, contents, debris, and concrete foundations going back to the city, and that the balance of the cost required would be taken care of through LHSC and the agreement that we have, but going back to 3.01, which then discusses the that would be pending based off the fact of if the cost assessment was still correct, and if we would need to reassess those costs and how much the city might need to pay over and above that. I just wanted to make sure that looking through that what dispute resolutions that we have or methods that we have that we would be seeing to try and see what that might be if there is a need in the future.
It's an excellent question. There isn't a dispute mechanism in the agreement. This has really been a long relationship, as you can see, if you read the letters in the appendices, since 1997, and it was viewed, I think, by both sides of the transaction as a win-win. And so we've tried to balance interests against costs. So I'm confident that that's the best dispute resolution mechanism. Obviously, the courts are available if there was a serious problem, and we could always choose an arbitrator if that was seen as appropriate, if there was a intractable problem that developed during construction. But I think we have to be prepared that there may be in any construction project of this complexity, there may be problems that arise that result in one party would be LHSC, because the city's funding here is capped, coming back to the city and saying, for these reasons, this cost us a lot more than we expected. I'm treating this as a final deal, but nothing's final. The reality is if there were compelling reasons for the contractor to seek extra money rather than a project like this grind to a halt while we sort that dispute out, I'll be back certainly advising council of that, and it would be council's decision as to how to deal with that dispute, whether there was reasonable grounds for it and whether we should contribute more. But the whole idea here is that we have tried to work on the basis of an increased funding formula. I pointed that out here, so that LHSC would project manage some of the more difficult parts of this project.
Through the chair, thank you, Mr. Belch, for that. This, looking through this, and I think, for many people seeing this, will be a complicated and complex project, but we've already stick-handled, I think, way through quite a lot of it, which is great to see. And I know that we've had a good working relationship with them, and hopefully that will continue forward. I guess, we're looking at a timeline here of over sometime within the next year, essentially, of hopefully a lot of this being completed. If there was a need to reassess those costs, and that might come back to the city, is there any sort of timeline we could expect on if that was necessary, when we might see something like that?
If I could just respond with one point. One of the problems we had with Phase A was the Colburn building and the poor condition of the roof. We had to go in immediately after that project was complete and put on a new roof. I forget if the cost, it was in the 200 to 400,000 range. I expect that there was going to be similar costs associated with the buildings that we're saving. Obviously, LHSC has not spent money on maintaining these buildings. They've been clear about that. We've had many opportunities to view the building, but I expect, based on the city's own assessment through independent consultants, that those are weak points for both of these buildings that will be saved. And as with the Colburn building, mold becomes a big issue. When a roof structure fails, you're going to have mold within a matter of months developing in those buildings. So that's the kind of cost that may come up that will either require extra work during the project to remove the mold, or alternatively a new roof as soon as the project is done on the part of the city. In the report, I had mentioned that the project was supposed to be done by June. That was based on an early agenda that I was given. Things are tightening up now that the contract with the general contractor has been signed, and I understand they're now forecasting more likely October, November, but I think your comment that it's a project that will take about a year is probably accurate.
A mover for that? Councillor Van Holst, seconder. Councillor Zaifman, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll have that up on the screen.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 5-0.
Brings us to item 2.4, elected officials remuneration. I believe this was pulled by Councillor Van Holst. Essentially is dealing with the federal tax policy change where they're getting rid of the 1/3 exemption for all elected officials. Most of them are municipal, some of them are not, some of them are provincial officials. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you very much. So my question through to your staff, since the access councils are responsible for their own remuneration, what would be the impact of just bumping this to the next council so they can make this decision?
Through the chair, I just want to make sure I understand the question. Are you suggesting, so the 1/3 the 1/3 exemption has already been removed as per the Canada Revenue Agency. It was part of the budget submission that went forward last year. So that will take effect January 1st, 2019. So this bylaw is simply enacting what has already been approved through the CRA regulations that will be coming forward effective January to remove the 1/3. Is that answer your question?
No, actually, I noticed we're also making some change for the mayor here. But my question is simply this, where we can make this decision, or the next council in December could make this decision. So I'm wondering, is there something that would stop the next council from enacting this?
Just before we continue on, I'm just going to clarify, on page 37 of the package, it may be helpful to look at what the bylaw actually says. So the bylaw has 4 parts. The first part is repealing one of the bylaws we've already passed. This is back in 2002 about the 1/3 tax exemption. It's revoking that resolution authorizing the staff to take administrative actions to bring effect to that, and then giving a date where it's gonna come into effect, right? So it's getting rid of the 1/3 tax exemption only. That's all the bylaw is doing. And that's to be in line with what the federal government has done, which said you can't do that anymore.
Okay, maybe I could ask staff to then comment on the, and I'm sorry, did we also decide that we were going to give the mayor the same take-home pay? Adjust his salary to have an equivalent take-home pay?
We did not, and the bylaw doesn't do that.
All right, I'm sorry, I guess I took from table 2, that was happening here. Okay.
Deputy Mayor Hubert.
So there's two pieces here. One piece is just a catch-up administrative piece, okay? So the decisions have been made, there's no, wringing of hands or gnashing of teeth. This is a decision that we've already made. This is just bringing the bylaw in conformity with the federal law that basically trumps anything that we do here.
privilege,
Sorry.
thank you. I don't, is the deputy mayor accusing me of wringing hands and gnashing teeth? Because I think my question was just, is there a difference between us making the decision and the next council?
Excuse me, I'm just saying there's really nothing, I'm not even commenting on your question, Councillor. I'm just saying there's really nothing, this is just catching up. Sorry, that's all that is. The second part is to table 2, and I think there's a piece that's kind of missing to table 2 that might have been good to have. It's in the paragraph, really the first paragraph of page 35 of the report is the mayor's salary. The councillor's salary, we're just catching up administratively, and so we don't need to get too exercised. That's all I'm saying. We're just catching up administratively. With the mayor, I wish in the chart it would have had, and I think we can fill it out, that what we would need to do exactly the same thing for the mayor as we're doing for other members of council, I think it's in the paragraph below, is if we're going to keep the mayor at exactly the same salary level, if you will, and make up for the loss of the 1/3 tax-free status, we would have to change his salary level to $138,025. Is that correct? So the to me, this is not about who's in the chair or anything like that, whether we like that person, don't like that person, who we're going to elect. And it's a fundamental fairness piece of setting salary levels that are appropriate. And in this case, and this is why I never supported in the past, and there was a compensation task force of 4 or 5 years ago that recommended getting rid of the 1/3. And I said, don't do that because it just costs the taxpayers of London more money. So that train has come to its end of the track by virtue of the federal law. And however, to take our mayor's salary from 106 and lower his her take home from 83 to 68 seems fundamentally unfair. So I would be suggesting that no, we don't wait until the next. Now to your point, Michael, waiting until the next term of the council, I don't agree with that because this shouldn't be the first and most important thing that new council has to deal with, whoever they may be. They'll have a lot of things to deal with in terms of the budget, the 4-year strat plan, all those sorts of things, and this could become a bit of a distractor. So. My view, is, and I have no skin in this game whatsoever, is that we need to increase the mayor's salary so that it stays on the par with what it is, and that's what the report says, that in order for the mayor's take-home pay to remain equal As a result of the elimination of the 1/3 exemption, the annual stipend would have to be increased from 106 to 138.25. And so, Mr. Chair, the Compensation Task Force never wrestled with or determined or sought input on what the appropriate level of salary is. And I know from my dealings with mayors across Canada from FCM, many of them are being paid significantly more than that. So I think it would be fundamentally unfair, given the stature, the responsibility, being on call as your chief executive officer 24/7, that the mayor's salary be decreased. And so, Mr. Chair, and I don't know what we do with the bylaw, Madam Clerk, but I would want to be moving that, that we would increase the mayor's salary to at least the 138. And just for rounded numbers, I think it would be appropriate, since it's about half of 1%, for it to go to an even round 140. So that would be my motion. I'm open to hearing from my colleagues on that.
Just before we find if there's a second, I want to clarify the language of the motion. So it seems separate from the bylaw itself. I don't think it affects the bylaw at all, but separately, you'd like to increase the salary of the mayor from $106,030 to $140,000.
I just think it's a round number, but if committee's more comfortable with 138.25, I'm okay with that too, okay? Just for simplicity. But I would like the language in the resolution to actually take the language right out of the report here, if we're gonna do the 138, and says, and to say, as a result of the elimination of the 1/3 exemption by the federal government, the annual stipend would be increased from. Okay, Bart?
Okay, perhaps I'll have the clerk work on some language. I'll see if there's a seconder right now for that at 138.25. I don't see anyone. I've got other speakers, so Councillor Morgan, go ahead.
Yes, just to provide the clarification that the chair provided again, this has nothing to do with setting any levels of compensation. This has to do with us bringing our procedures and bylaws in line with the federal law. And all the bylaw says is that we're going to do that. And quite frankly, we don't have a choice. It's federal law, so all we're doing is bringing that back in. Any discussion about changing other salaries about councillor or mayor is a discussion for either, new business or some other part of the agenda. But I would prefer to keep this separate. I know it certainly outlines some issues that are raised based on previous decisions we've made, but this bylaw is really about bringing ourselves into conformity with the federal legislation. And so I'm certainly willing to support doing that, because I don't think we actually have a choice but to do that. And I've actually supported us removing the 1/3 allowance for quite some time anyways.
Any additional speakers on the committee? I know Councillor Usher wants to weigh in on this. Go ahead, Councillor Usher, and then I'll come back to you, Deputy Mayor.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is the second reason why I'm here at this meeting, because I wanted to address this. I'm going to have to ask clerk to correct me if I'm wrong, or the treasurer, because I believe that when the report, I want to address two things. I want to address the councillors' remuneration, and I want to address the mayor's. And first of all, I want you to understand that I'm not going to benefit from this in any way whatsoever. I'm speaking out of experience and understanding of this position. For years, we've been trying to do something with his salary. Last year, we've had many organizations or committees that come into task force, I should say, that came in and look at this. And the last task force took 2 years to come up with an answer. I'm talking about the councillor's income, salary or remuneration. And if I remember rightly, this number is not a direct adjustment based on the 1/3 tax-free. It's a combination of both. And I would like the treasurer to identify that to me if I'm wrong with that, because I'm hearing here that it's just that, I think I'm hearing that it is just that adjustment, but it is more than just the announced adjustment. And it was an agreement, a recommendation based on the median employment income in London of 2016. That's what it was based on. We took it up there and we said we'll adjust everything to that, but it was more than just the 1/3. Through you, Mr. Chair, may I ask staff if they could address that?
Go ahead. You might need your microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, through the chair. So the resolution that was passed on August 23rd, 2017, the councillor's salary was based on the full-time employment income in 2015, based on the 2016 census. So that number, 51,181, was based on that number that was calculated as a result of the census. In the same resolution, the clerk was also directed to remove the 1/3 exemption, noting that that salary will be fully taxable effective the new term of council.
So, thank you. So, Mr. Chair, the point I really wanted to make was that we can't go around, I don't think that we can go around and saying this number is a direct adjustment, because I don't think it's more than an adjustment. It's also an increase in remuneration. I agree with it, by the way. I just want you to know that, because we agree with the report when it was presented. But I think that we need to be sure that when we state it, we understand that it was an increase plus the 1/3 adjustment. That's as far as the 51,000, sorry, what is it? 51,181,000 is concerned. Okay? My other concern, Mr. Chair, is to do with the mayor's income. I fully agree with Councillor Hubert, or Deputy Mayor Hubert. This doesn't look good, and I think that this decision has to be made now before the end of the year, by the way, before the new council takes shape. I don't think that we should leave this for the new council. I think it will be a whole big distraction, and it will never happen. It has never happened over the years that I have been here, where we as a council give an increase to ourselves. We're always afraid to do it, and I say we should do it now. And we are doing a disservice and a dishonest disservice to the mayor's income, whosoever the mayor is, because the mayor's income after that 1/3 adjustment is $138,025. It is not the same 106. The 106 was based on the fact that 1/3 of it is also non-taxable. So if we're going to adjust that according to the federal government's regulation, then we should adjust the dollars. And according to this report, it says that if we want to do that, we should adjust the dollars to $138,025. And that's what Councillor Hubert is talking about, and I would fully support that. Thank you.
It just, I don't know how much longer we're going to talk about this particular topic, but I think people can disagree about what the level of a remuneration should be without being dishonest, and I don't think we need to use those kind of terms. Go ahead.
Well, from an HR perspective, when a position, and I understand we're going to have a change of the person in the position, but that person's going to be paid, that new person as of December 1st will have a certain pay level with certain benefits accrued to that pay level. When you change, and I'll look to Ms. Photo to confirm this, along with her sidekick, Mr. Card there, but when you change the benefits of someone and the salary level of someone without them agreeing to that in their employment contract, it's constructive dismissal. And that's what we're doing here. So I know we're elected officials, and I know it's different in that.
Deputy Mayor Huber, are you looking to get legal advice about an
No,
HR matter?
No, I'm not. I'm looking for HR to, I don't need to go in camera, but to our staff. My understanding is that would be a form of constructive dismissal. So I'll look to staff to comment on that. But I think there's a fundamental employment fairness issue here.
Just one sec. Councillor Morgan.
Yes.
Sorry,
No, I'm going to make a point of order.
He has a point of order.
I have a point of order. The councillor suggested that we are doing something that is against HR practices. What we are doing is bringing ourselves into compliance with federal legislation that has already passed. We are not doing this. We are not adjusting the salary. That's a decision we made previously, but we are not, with this bylaw, doing anything besides bringing ourselves into compliance with federal legislation that already exists. That is what we are doing today. That is what is on the table.
I would say that's not a point of order, but an interesting point for discussion. Either Mr. Card or Ms. Photo, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, the wages paid to councillors would not be affected by the change that's presented by the treasurer. So that is something we're doing simply to acknowledge that the law has changed with respect to the treatment of stipends paid to councillors. With respect to the question asked by Deputy Mayor Hubert, the council, members of council don't have an employment relationship with the Corporation of the City of London. Their conditions of office are set out in different legislation. The pay that they receive would not be considered wages. The benefits would not be that kind of compensation. So I don't see that there's a parallel there that can be drawn upon for the purpose of this discussion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other discussion? There's two issues, right? There's the bylaw that's being recommended, and then there's the related but somewhat separate issue about what the remuneration of the mayor should be. Okay, I'm going to turn the chair to Councillor Morgan. I'm just going to weigh in on this.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, I think we should be adjusting the salary of the mayor so that the net pay is the same. I mean, if we do nothing, the mayor will essentially, the position of mayor will essentially be getting a pay cut because of a federal tax policy change. I don't think that's appropriate. I think it's just normal and reasonable to keep the take-home pay of the mayor's position the same. If we hadn't have made any changes to the councillor compensation, I'm sure many other municipalities are dealing with the exact same issue, which is they're going to adjust the pays so that people get the same take-home as they were getting before. And so I think it's fine to adjust the pay so that there's no net change for the position. We're not increasing the salary of the mayor. Yeah, it's costing the municipality more to pay the mayor the same. And that's a change that happened because the federal government made some changes to tax policy, which I actually think were good changes overall. So, you know, I support that. I want to make sure that it's clear that that's what's happening. You know, if that's what we do, that we're keeping the mayor's take-home pay the same. And we're not increasing it, we're just keeping it the same based on what some other level of government has done in terms of how they tax remuneration of elected officials. I think that's reasonable. I don't think it needs to happen on a particular timeline. I think we just need to make sure we do it before January 1st, 2019, when the change is going to come into effect at the federal level. So I'm comfortable with dealing with it now. I think it's something we've just been hanging there. We didn't deal with the mayor's compensation level at all in the council compensation task force. That's the reason it hasn't been adjusted at all. And this change, if we were to make it, is just to keep it the same. It's essentially preserving the status quo, which I think is quite reasonable. So I would support it, and I'll second Deputy Mayor's motion as long as it's 138,025, which I think is keeping it the same, and not 140, which is a small increase that I don't support.
Okay, I'll pass the chair back to Councillor Helmer.
Are there any other speakers? No? Okay, so I think there's a seconder now, and then we'll see what the motion actually says. And then I have Deputy Mayor, or I have Councillor Van Holst, I think. Give your hand up. Councillor Van Holst? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to go back to my original question, which was just kind of a fact-finding thing regarding this 1/3, and it seemed like the mayor's was going to be attached to that. Could the next council make this decision just as easily as us without some negative impact that I don't know about?
Through the chair, without council direction to change the salary, the net take-home pay would be effective January 1st with the 1/3 change. If the new council were to amend it and increase it, there would be a retroactive pay that would become in place to do for the difference. So that decision could be made as well in the new year.
Okay, thank you. Or slightly before the new year. I think the council has a meeting. That was the piece of information that I hope to find out. But thank you. And if the motion is up, I guess I'm happy to speak to that as well. This makes a lot of sense. I think this is the fair thing to do. We didn't intend any negative consequence like this to happen to the mayor.
Any further discussion? Okay. Yeah, I've had a question from Councillor Morgan if we could vote on it separately, which we certainly can. Yep. Councillor Usher.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I have a concern about A. I'm not here to debate. I don't like to debate at committees that I don't belong to. There's no numbers in this. And the way this is stated, I still don't think that this is the right statement, because I don't think that the dollars that we are saying here is an exact correlation based on a 1/3 adjustment. I think it's more than that. And I think we need to be careful how we make this statement in A.
Okay, I'm just going to try and clarify. So the part A is saying this particular proposed bylaw, which is attached to the report, be introduced at the council meeting. The bylaw is very specific, and it repeals certain resolutions. That's what it does. It doesn't adjust the pay of councillors at all. It just deals with resolutions we passed in the past about things being 1/3 tax-free, and those are being repealed. That's it.
So are we saying that the dollar amount for the councillors is not being part of this motion?
It is not part of this motion. It is referenced in the bylaw. It is a decision that we made in August of 2017.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, let's open the vote. So this is just the first part, as we're voting on it separately.
Closing the vote, and that motion carries 5-0.
Have the second part out. Okay, just to be clear, the part B here says the mayor's salary for January 1st, 2019 be increased to $138,025 annually in order to accommodate for the elimination of the allowance noted in part A above and to maintain the take-home pay at the current level. Okay.
Closing the vote, that motion carries 3-2.
Okay, that brings us to schedule items, of which there are none. Items for direction, there are none. Any deferred matters or additional business? I don't see any. Brings us to confidential. There are 3 items, all of which are land acquisition or disposition and solicitor client privilege related advice to those matters. Just look for a motion to go into closed session. Deputy Mayor Hubert, seconded by Councillor Zafman. Let's have that open. I believe we're in committee room 3, and I suspect since there's no additional business, we'll be adjourning from the committee room.
Closing the vote, that motion carries 5-0.